Hey y'all,
What's going on, everyone?
I'm Jay,
And I'm Chris the Bird Nerd.
and we
We are
are
the
the
Bird
Bird
Brains.
Brains. Dead on my end.
Hey, good. Well,
Yeah, we'll see.
hopefully it'll line up. We'll be all right. We'll take it.
Um, yeah, so kind of I guess like a tough one today.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Um,
Halloween's coming. Maybe it's like a morbid one. Maybe I don't
yeah, morbid is maybe the right word. So, I've come across this couple people in my DMs lately asking me about birds dying. Finches dying in the aviary or in your cages or collection or however you want to call it. And so today we're going to talk about what to do about birds dying.
The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains.
All right, before we get to this super intense topic, uh, if you want your birds not to die, a good thing to do is to feed them top quality bird seed. Where would they find that, Chris?
At Yours Only New Zealand. So our awesome sponsors that sponsor our podcast and our private channels. Reach out, go out to their websites, look at their products. I mean, they've got everything from medications to keep your birds healthy, awesome seeds and treats to keep your birds healthy, play toys to keep your birds engaged and healthy, all things to keep your birds alive, which is the opposite of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So use code BirdBrains. You get 10% off and you help support the podcast. You help us keep doing this. And we're not getting paid, but they send us
Right.
seed, they send us stuff to review. So helps us out. And it's good for the bird community and good for y'all. They already have really good prices, plus you're getting 10% off and you're getting the right stuff.
Yep.
So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited when it's fully done to have like a one-stop shop for all the medications and stuff that you might need to prevent this from happening.
Yep. It'll
Um,
be
but but
awesome.
yeah, dead birds. So I know you've been there. I know I've been there. Go out in the morning to do your morning feeding or check
Oh
on the
man.
birds, and there's a bird on the bottom of the aviary, dead as a doornail.
Yeah. And it's the inevitable when you have birds, especially small finches. They're fragile animals for the most part, and their life expectancies are not super long. You're looking anywhere between realistically 4 to 10 years for your average finch lifespan, and then it kind of varies as you get into the old or the bigger birds. So really, not a lot of years to be lived. So that there could be, some circumstances there. You've got birds that are susceptible to health concerns, things like that. So yeah, I'll be honest with you. There's a few times where I get nervous walking into my bird shed. If I know it's been a really cold night, that's when I get nervous walking in. And even though my bird shed's heated, it's always that, okay, did something happen? Or when I come home from a trip and when I come home from a trip, then I'm doing like the 10-point inspections, right? I'm looking at
Yeah,
every corner of my aviary, every cage tray, every nest box, just to see where I'm at, and hopefully there was no casualties and things like that. But yeah, when you walk in and see a dead bird on the ground, it sucks. I'll be honest with you. Like it's never oh yeah, I got a dead bird. I mean, it's like crap. What happened? And so that's my initial reactions, and then usually I'll pick up the bird, inspect it, because I want to try and understand what led to it. Sometimes you have old birds, sometimes you have sick birds that you already maybe are know that they're headed that way and expect it, and other times it's completely by surprise, and you're like, I don't understand what happened, how it happened, and so trying to understand the reasonings that led to the demise of this individual bird, and how we can prevent it from happening again.
yeah. I mean, I'd say I pretty much always have a bird that I'm worried about. for one reason or
Mm,
another. So right now, today, I have 125 birds. So
nice.
when you have 125 birds, Einstein's big. I got some cockatiels, but everybody else is a little bird. They're fragile. A million things can happen. But I pretty much always have one. It's not always the same one, but there's usually some bird that when I'm watching, I'm like, that one's having a hard time. So there's
Yeah.
usually one I'm worried about. And like when I go out of town and my wife's in charge, we have a deal. Like it's never going to be her fault. And then I'll tell her like, hey, there's a Gouldian out there that's puffed up, acting weird. I'm
Yeah.
worried about it. It might die. Just kind of warning her.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say? We have about the same size collections. What would you say? How many birds do you kind of typically lose in a calendar year of adults, not chicks, which is a different thing?
Yeah. And that fluctuates year to year. Sometimes, some years I have good years, some years I have bad years. This one was a fairly decent year, but I still probably lost. Oh, goodness. Probably, we've got above 100 birds, but I've probably lost 10 to 12 birds this year, adults. All different reasons, whether it was old age, sickness, or I had some that I have no idea how they died. I did have, and I shared it in our podcast several episodes ago. I lost four parrot finches in one night because
Mm,
my water kicked out and it got no, it wasn't the water. It got cold. It
yeah,
was
the
springtime
heater.
and I didn't have my heater on and it got cold. It was one of those big temp fluxes and I didn't turn the heater on and I came to four dead parrot finches. That one sucked. And they were my breeding pairs. I was setting them up to breed. Um, so yeah, 10, I said 10 to 12, probably 10 to 15. I don't know. I haven't counted exactly, but probably in that range throughout the year. Adults, you throw in babies and it's a lot more, but
Yeah, and
talk
and
adult wise.
we've talked about the chicks before, and I'll just say this because this is really about adult birds this episode. But chicks, the survival rate from a chick from hatching to adult is like 5% in the wild. Even in captivity, parents decide not to feed one because it's smaller. They have
Yeah,
genetic defects that you don't know about when they're born.
right.
Illness, all kinds of, babies are just like human babies are much more sensitive. I'd say my chick survival rate across all the species, some lower, some better than this, is probably 80%. And I've fledged like 125 chicks so far this year. So what's 20% of that is like 25 baby birds that didn't make it for one reason or
Hmm.
another, or this or that.
Right.
They didn't get out of the shell. It doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about today. Um, I'm mostly talking about, going in and you have an adult bird that you either were worried about or you weren't, and you're surprised, like you said. And I'd say I'm about 50-50 on those. Um, so yeah, very similar process to me. I'll pick it up, I'll examine it, I'll feel like the breastbone to feel how it
Hmm.
was health wise. If it's a hen, especially check for egg binding, which I'll
Yep.
feel down by the vent. And on your African species, on your Australian species, egg binding's pretty obvious. Your African species, it's really just this little rock you're feeling for. Or like, I lost a button quail a few months ago that she had a huge mass on her
Mm.
chest that
Yep.
was like by the time she died was almost the size of a tangerine, and the whole button quail is only as big as my fist. But I only got like half of it out, so I'm assuming the other half was on the inside, and eventually it just killed her. So
Yeah.
I've had other birds that I lost to cancer where you're feeling on them after they're dead, and you feel a weird hard lump somewhere. I mean it's a plethora of things that it can be. I've had a rat get in. The worst one I ever had, talking about your heater, and we've talked about this in our most heartbreaking stories, is I had some kind of wild animal get in my quarantine cage and get 11 birds that I had just started
Oh,
quarantining.
man.
Well over $1,000, and it was like maybe some got loose. I'm looking around, nope, got all 11, right?
Yeah.
So, um, you'll have stuff like that, kind of weird anomalies, and that's a different thing. But yeah, I'd say somewhere between 5, 10, 12 is what I expect. Not expect, I don't want to, but I typically will lose in a year. And it's a combination of illness, weather, animal issues, egg binding. It's a whole host of things. So the big thing, the first thing I wanted to say in this episode is don't give up birds,
Yeah.
right? We've all been there. We've lost birds. They're small. They're fragile. It's like if you have a pet dog and your dog dies of old age, you don't go, I'm the worst dog owner.
Right.
I'm never getting a dog again. It's part of the deal. Finches, like we said, the average age, if you take all of our finches, is probably like 7 years. That means
Right.
half are going to live less than seven. That's what average means, right? So,
Right.
consider that and then try to figure out what happened, right? Like that heater thing or my animal attack thing, very obvious. Okay, I didn't do a good enough job protecting the birds. Those are the ones that hurt the worst because you're like, that's on me. I failed the bird and I'm,
Right.
in charge here. Those always suck. And then the the next one, I think after that sucks is illness.
Yeah. And
Um,
and
Go
with
ahead.
those illnesses, Jay, it's I think it's a twofold thing. Sometimes you have birds that don't show the illness until it's literally the day before they die, and it happens. Other times you have birds that, for an extended period of time, show that illness, and hopefully you're taking that bird out, quarantining them, medicating them as best to your knowledge. If you're experienced with birds, if not, taking them to a vet, letting them diagnose them and get you the proper medications. Um, if I have a bird that is sick, and that happens, like if you have an aviary with lots of different birds, you're gonna get illnesses that come through, no matter how clean you keep your aviaries, no matter how secluded you keep them from the wild animals. It's gonna happen. I mean, it's like flu season for humans. No matter how many times you wash your hands, at some point you're gonna get a cold.
Right.
And that's coming from a health person who works in the health industry and encourages everyone to wash their hands every moment you can. So, but I think if I have a bird that passes away from illness, Jay, my first thing that I do is, I mean, we take the birds, I examine them. If I haven't already had them in quarantine, on medication, and the bird just suddenly dies. Canaries are famous for this. They literally can get sick and die within 24-hour period, and you never knew that they were sick. I will look at when I'm examining the birds, I'm looking at their vents. If their vents are dirty, that's a sign of illness. If their nostrils and the feathers around their nostrils are dirty, that's another sign of illness or sickness of some sort. And so I'm looking for those signs, looking at their eyes, um, and when I do that, then it kind of puts me in a hyper vigilant mode. And for the next few days, if I don't know what this bird's illness was, I'm watching all of my birds for the next few days to see if something's popping up. So if I need to medicate my entire flock or pull out different birds that are showing signs of illness after this one had passed away so that I can correct whatever illness is going through. Just making sure that I'm doing that. I've heard of a lot of breeders that have lost a lot of birds because they didn't try to observe and diagnose their birds, and they just slowly died one by one, and they didn't, you know, do anything to prevent it. And so that's definitely one thing that I'm looking for if I have illness and birds that are dying from illnesses. What can I do to stop them? What other birds are showing signs? How can I pull them out and quarantine them? Or how am I medicating my entire flock so that I can prevent this from happening again? How about you, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, very similar things. Um, I'm looking for signs of illness. I'm treating sick birds the minute I know they're sick. It doesn't matter. We could be on the way to church. I'll stop, say, I drop everything else. That bird's got to get on heat right now.
Yeah,
Um, but you're going to lose birds for a
right,
variety of things. The trick is to not to lose birds to the same thing over and over, like you said, and be you know man or woman enough to admit, okay, I've got a problem here. and
Yeah.
not just use the ostrich method of bury your head in the sand, right? It's like, all right, you know, like
Right.
someone reached out to me recently and said, like, I've lost a couple of birds, I think from air sac mites, but I'm doing this treatment, and well, the treatment wasn't right. So like they're gutted, but the flip side is they could just keep humming along. At least they were smart enough, brave enough to reach out and say, "Hey, I think I might be making a mistake here. What do
Yeah.
I do?" And I'm able to help them at that point. So
Right.
the when you get to that point, you've got to have like the introspection and the courage to figure out that you got a problem, start working towards that solution,
Yeah.
start figuring out, always be improving, right? Like we've talked about, it's kind of an extension of do your homework. So,
Right.
you know, I don't fault anyone for losing birds. I do fault people who lose birds and don't do anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And one thing I was going to say too is if you can be proactive, be proactive. I mean, the second you see a bird starting to fluff up, that's not normal, right? The only time a
Hmm.
bird fluffs up is when it's sleeping, and it should only be sleeping at certain times throughout the day and at night. If they're just on a perch in the middle of the day and everyone's active and your bird's fluffed up sleeping, something's obviously not right, and that should be the moment you're seeing signs of it, taking those birds out, trying to get them medication, getting them heat. And many times you can save the birds, and if you do it soon enough, if you don't do anything, then obviously the bird's going to die, and you're going to be out probably several $100 depending on the types of birds that you have. So the other thing, Jay, there's times when I walk into the aviary or my bird shed and I see a bird dead on the floor. I pick it up, I examine it, I try to go through all of the different circumstances that would have or could have caused this bird to die, right? I'm looking at food sources, water sources, illness. If none of those check out, sometimes you have birds that I can't explain why they die, to be honest with you. They're not old in age. And, a few theories or things, I do think, and I'm looking through the entire aviary to try and see, okay, what would have caused this? One thing that is real for birds is night frights.
I was gonna say
And
I've lost a bird to night frights for sure.
right, and if it's dark enough in there and they can't see where they're going, they can fly into things, they can break their neck, they can injure themselves severely, fall down to the ground, get disoriented. So one thing I have done in my shed is I've provided a night light, and that's year round for my birds. It's just enough that if they were to get spooked, hopefully they could see just enough to find the perch, but it's not enough light that's going to keep them awake throughout the night. And so that has really been a huge help and benefit. And sometimes there's other things that I just can't explain, but I'm always trying to go through and say, okay, let me make sure there's no sharp objects that are injuring my birds. They have full access to all food sources and water sources, and it's obvious to them where those are at. Predator proofing my space, and then obviously checking for illnesses. Those are the things that I try to do on a daily basis to ensure that my birds are as safe as possible and are not dying. But sometimes you come in, you have a bird dead on the ground, and you can't figure it out, and it's either a night fright, or something else that you just can't quite explain,
Yeah, I
unfortunately,
mean,
and I don't know how to address that, but
yeah, I mean, I had one. I had a hen shaft tail once. I was watching her. She was in a nest, sitting on eggs, but I could see into the nest. And in front of me, this is at like 3 in the afternoon, one random day, she had a massive seizure, started thrashing around, fell out of the nest on the ground, and died within about 8 seconds. What do you do other than just
yeah,
sit there stunned about that?
yeah,
Right. So just like people, massive heart attack, aneurysm. I mean, there's a million things. I will say too, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. So quarantine your birds. If a bird is sick, pull it out right away, not just for that bird, but to protect your other birds. I treat with medications. We've talked about the how to treat sick birds episode, but I treat prophylactically, which means
hmm
preventatively. So even if all my birds are healthy, I will treat with scat. I'll treat with Ronnie Vet, and I'll treat with Moxie Vet. So I'll deworm, I'll anti-parasite, and I'll anti-protozoal around the breeding season. And we've talked about that in other episodes, and I don't want to rehash all
Yeah.
that, but those things help keep your problems lower, feeding your birds the right food, letting them have lots of room to exercise, keeping them in the right climate, all these things. Right now is the time to lose birds, right? Because they've been breeding, they're
Yes.
depleted on nutrients, they're all tired, the temperature's starting to get colder. It's kind of a perfect storm this time of year. Just
Yep.
like we all get colds in the fall, kind of the perfect storm. But keeping them warm, keeping them well fed, keeping them in good shape, those kinds of things, just like for people, those things help with birds. But you're never going to, if somebody told me, oh, I have a big aviary and I never lose birds, okay, sure.
Right.
So, we
Well,
we
and,
want
and
to,
I
I
go
was gonna
for
say,
it.
we want to be honest. It's not always all sunshine and rainbows. We lose birds. It does happen. So, if that's happening to you, try to figure out why, keep your head up, ask for help.
Yep, which is exactly what I was just going to say, Jay. Don't let the death of your bird be the end of you ever keeping birds, right? We want to try and be as responsible as we can and provide the best environments and care for our birds as we possibly can. But whether you own any animal or anything in life, right? Death is the ultimate end that everyone's going to receive, and so it's just making sure that if something happens to your birds that you don't get too discouraged by it. You learn from it if there's a learning moment, and continue on being better for the next birds that you own. And so hopefully you can keep that in mind. There's been a few times I've had a lot of birds die due to mistakes, and it makes me want to hang up the hat. And I'm glad that I haven't, and have trudged through that and learned from those moments, and have made sure that my birds will never experience something like that again. And we move forward, and we go on, but hopefully with hope in the future, and hope for more birds, and happy, healthy runs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done with this about once a week for about 30 seconds. And I
Yeah.
go, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've all been there. It sucks, but it'll get better. Hang in there, reach out for help. If they need help, Chris, where could they find you?
Yep. Reach out to me. Instagram is BirdNerd4. YouTube and Facebook is both BirdNerd. Uh, Love to hear your comments and appreciate them that have come in these last few weeks, and look forward to them, really. How about you, Jay? How can they get a hold of you?
I'm on YouTube, obviously, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, which sucks, and Reddit. The Javiary or the underscore Javiary on all of those. If you can't find me and you can find Chris or vice versa, obviously we can put you in touch with the other one. Uh, Feel free to drop into our DMs. We're not going to judge.
Yeah.
We are going to try to help. If you go back to our pet peeves episode, if we try to help and you don't want the help, different story. But if you
Yeah.
if you if you come to us and want help, we're both nice guys. We want to help you. We want to help you figure out what happened and move forward. And we're here, so don't be afraid to drop a comment, shoot us a DM.
Absolutely. Please
We
do.
are here to help. We've been there. We promise.
Yes, yes.
All right. I think that's about it. Big shout out to New Zealand. Thank you. Thanks y'all for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Appreciate you guys. We'll see you.